Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we behold the amazing transformation that takes place when a caterpillar called Clear Channel creates a cocoon and emerges as a butterfly known as iHeartMedia. So pretty.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, the official podcast of Monsters Unlimited, a creative agency with a business brain. I'm Shad Conley, Communications Director at Monsters Unlimited, but you can just call me iHeart Shad.
And I'm Patrick Jebber, Creative Director at my favorite place on Earth, iMonsters. Wait, no, that's not it.
Put an I in front of everything, it's good. This is your first time checking out the podcast. 1, where have you been? 2, our goal on Speaking Human is to simplify complex marketing topics. We toss aside all the buzzwords and mumbo-jumbo to focus on how marketing can bring brands and people together. On today's episode, we delve into the topic of brand name changes by exploring Clear Channel's recent move to inject a little love into the heart of their brand. Oh yeah. So let's get into it.
You imagine your company has a name for years, decades, and then you say, wait a minute, we can do better. What is in a new name? The media company formerly known as Clear Channel rebranding itself as iHeartMedia.
What you just heard there was an audio clip from a very dramatic Fox Business News segment on September 16th discussing the branding change taking place at the company formerly known as Clear Channel. That video, which you can find a link to in our show notes, also features an interview with the company's chairman and CEO, Bob Pittman. Patrick, do you want to tell us a little bit more about this company and their rebranding effort that we're going to be talking about today?
Let me tell you something, Chad. Clear Channel was founded in 1972 and owns and operates 859 radio stations across the United States. But as of September 17th, the name Clear Channel is DOA. The radio behemoth is taking on a new name, iHeartMedia, which you talked about a little bit in the intro. A name inspired by its digital radio platform known as iHeartRadio. So iHeartMedia, iHeartRadio. You can see the connection there?
It's pretty complex, but I think I got it.
Okay. So the company said in a press release, iHeartMedia reflects both the success and the cultural impact of the iHeartRadio business, formed 3 years ago, and the evolution of the company's major local radio station brands and franchises to include mobile, social, and events, because they're big on events and social and mobile.
They love events. So we should note that the Clear Channel name will kind of still live on. I think that's going to be their advertising arm, will still be called Clear Channel, but for all their media stuff, iHeartMedia is sort of the umbrella name of everything now.
Yeah.
So basically what you're looking at here is what was once Clear Channel, pretty big, well-known company, now iHeartMedia. So what do you think? Is this a good name change? Bad move? Smart move? Stupid move? Give me your thoughts, Patrick.
Well, since you're asking my opinion, as you always do, I think it's a good move overall. The iHeartRadio brand, for me, I think has huge name recognition. And the name recognition doesn't stop with the people in the industry. So I think that's what's really important here. By doing this, they're expanding on that 245 million listeners a month who know the name, you know?
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things about this as opposed to a traditional rebranding where you're changing the name to something people have never heard of. You at least have kind of a base already in place with iHeartRadio.
Mm-hmm. Before, if you asked some random person who Clear Channel was, I doubt they would know unless they were in the radio / marketing / advertising business. You know what I mean?
Well, I think the name's probably recognizable to people, but I don't even know if they'd know necessarily what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the people who run radio stations, or they're the people who are responsible for iHeartRadio. They probably wouldn't make that connection.
Yeah, I mean, now if you ask somebody what iHeartMedia is, at least they know. They might not know what the company does, but they know it's connected with iHeartRadio, and they'll generally know what they do.
Yeah. So as a name itself, what do you think of iHeartMedia?
It's touchy. It's feely. It's touchy-feely.
Yeah, and it's better. I would say it's better. It's warmer. It's a little less corporate. And that's one of the things I think we're starting to see those, there was a kind of a slew of those generic corporate names that like 20 years plus ago, a lot of companies were using that very broad, kind of meaningless, very generic. A lot of those are kind of falling by the wayside. And for more of these type of directed towards people as opposed to just we're a company that owns a bunch of different other companies. So that's a good thing. We're shedding those away, which is something that's good for our corporate culture in general.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things where I don't even know, like 3 years ago, if somebody said that iHeartRadio was going to be as successful as it has been, I probably wouldn't have agreed with that. I didn't think it was that great of a name back then, but people picked up on it. And sometimes it's those weird little brands that take off.
It's kind of a weird trend we're seeing a little bit more of too. Whereas it used to be the brand and then you branch out and here's the other things, the products and stuff like that. And oftentimes their names would come from the brand. Now we're kind of seeing a reverse trend of that where like brands are taking on the names of their products. I can think of, like BlackBerry. The company that owned it was RIM and they ended up changing the name of the company to BlackBerry and then they went under.
Ooh, yeah.
Or going under, I don't know. But there's a kind of a few more instances like that. The other example I think of is recently they had the movie Edge of Tomorrow, came out and that was the name and then they put it out on Blu-ray and the covers and all stuff focus more on the tagline of Live, Die, Repeat, almost making that seem like it's the title.
I noticed that too. That's funny.
Marketing is becoming the branding in a way, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it makes it interesting because successful marketing campaigns can essentially become bigger than the brand itself.
In the case of, something like this, though, you already have a name that people had a good reaction to. It's like you got your testing from creating this app, and then you can just, all right, people like this, let's use it for our whole business.
Yeah, and they know it's successful, so why not?
Yeah. And so the other thing I think is kind of interesting here is you're seeing an example. Usually we see the opposite, where big companies wait too long to shed their outdated branding, like a snake shedding its skin. I think of Radio Shack as like a prime example. They were that for so long and they're just going to die being that. So this is an example of a company kind of getting in front of it. I mean, because Clear Channel is just outdated in a number of ways. You're thinking of what was once created to be like, oh yeah, it'll make people think of clear radio stations, which now, who cares about that?
Just one question. Can we make a recommendation to Radio Shack to become iHeart Radio Shack?
They should. Or iHeart the Shack. They did try to become the Shack, which didn't take.
I don't even know what that means. I mean, what would you go there for? I just don't even know because they don't have radios there.
It's just totally outdated.
iHeartRadio would totally disagree with you there. A lot of people use radios.
You can pull it off if you're talking about digital radio and obviously media now, covering everything, mobile, social, and events.
Mobile, social, and events. We should just keep saying that. Maybe that'll become a branding tagline like Live, Die, Repeat.
Live, Die, Repeat. Yeah, that's right. That's what they should change their name to, mobile, social, and events. And then they'll be like, oh, we do something else now. So anyway, taking this up to kind of a bigger scale, the, big picture, if you will, what are kind of the risks and challenges of a brand when it's changing its name? Because obviously that's a big move, especially if you're a brand that a lot of people know.
Well, in most cases, I'd say it's really risky. Clear Channel has been around for 40-something years, right? So people in the biz know who they are, and they're big players.
The fact that you said in the biz.
In the biz. I like that.
Joe Hollywood?
Are you in the biz? I'm in the biz. But that coupled with the fact that iHeartRadio, it's a business that was formed 3 years ago. I mean, that's such a short amount of time. Hello, 3 years ago. So some might say that's shooting from the hip and not really thinking things through long term for a company that's been around for 40-something years. But again, they've been around for 40-something years, so they maybe realize some things that, most people would say is risky. iHeartRadio is a brand that's really taken the world by storm, surprisingly so. So I prepared a few numbers for you, Shad.
And let's hear them.
And our listeners, 70% they have in consumer brand awareness of iHeartRadio. Record-breaking growth, digital growth, 50 million registered users, which is faster than, get this, Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest.
Whoa.
Yeah, 196 million monthly consumers. FYI, I've come to hate that term consumer. It's like the most unemotional look at humans.
Yeah, consumer, it's like it's below customer. You're not quite a customer. You're just a consumer.
You consume my goods.
But don't we all consume something?
Yeah, I mean, I consumed a burger at lunch. It was really good. Anyway, broadcast radio is still about 90% of all listening, though. That's an interesting stat. They even reference in some of their marketing of this new changeover.
Which isn't really surprising when you think about, there's all this new technology, but I still listen to the radio in the car sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I listen to satellite more now, but I mean, it's still satellite radio. I mean, they're talking about digital radio, which is really the same thing, Yeah,
I mean? Same concept, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Radio is just kind of taken on a new form. But I mean, radio is still radio. And where there's something that's free for most listeners outside of, obviously advertising is what pays for that. People are going to flock to it. Not everybody wants to pay for their music listening.
And they're still using programming broadcast from radio stations, just a lot of the times, rebroadcasting in the case of like iHeartRadio or live streaming. So yeah, when the name changes, can be a good or bad idea. It's usually, I think, pretty risky. You don't really want to do it unless a major shift kind of occurs in what you're doing, which your company actually does, which I think is the case here. You have an example where they've expanded into all this other media, mobile, social, and events, where it's not just focused on radio or that one clear channel anymore. So here it makes sense.
But it just goes to show that they're putting a lot of faith in the recognition that this new brand has and that people have accepted it much more readily than the Clear Channel name. But
yeah, and don't you think it sounds much more now? Mm-hmm. It sounds like a website or an app, iHeartMedia sounds more like something that exists in the here and now, as opposed to you hear Clear Channel and you potentially think of a company from the 70s or the 80s. It is so broad and so generic. So
the guy, Bob Pittman, who is the CEO.
Bobby P.
Yeah, Bobby P. He was instrumental in the Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Company's transition to MTV, because that's what it was formerly known as. So it's interesting, he has a history of this where, obviously MTV is a very successful brand. So he knows how to take something that's, who the hell goes around and says Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Company? Nobody, right?
Yeah.
So
and I think that's a good point, even with especially things that are dealing with technology, television, radio, digital, and you're kind of focused on this niche, there's going to be a point where it changes how people refer to it or how people talk about it. And that's when, obviously, a name like MTV, music television, is far more memorable than that, garbly goo you just spewed off. What can they take away from the Clear Channel name change? What can we learn?
I think the list of questions you should be asking yourself, thinking long and hard about what you're getting into, says what companies could take away from it, because they have to really look deep into, is this a smart move? What are the implications? What's going to happen? What are the negatives and the positives that can come out of this? So some of the questions, you think about, does that name that you're changing to have recognition? If not, why are you changing it? If so, why are you changing it? What are the negative implications of changing the name? When you're thinking about negative implications, because you should have a pretty decent list. One of which being that if your company has been in business for years, then it has an established brand name. And what will happen if you lose that? Is the new brand name better? And what does it bring to the table that your current company name doesn't have? So negative implications, you should have some. If somebody says there's nothing kind of come out of this that's negative, then you haven't been looking hard enough. And I think in this case, Clear Channel understood that immediate recognition they were gaining by changing their name,
Oh, no doubt. I'm sure they weighed the options and thought about this. Like we said, they had the little advantage of iHeartRadio there to work with, too.
And they added a little heart and emotion to a company that I think personally didn't exude a lot of it. Clear Channel just, it sounded very stuffy and, you said earlier, corporate,
Yeah, completely lacking in personality. So for mine, I'm just going to go to the words of a very wise band of gentlemen. Pearl Jam, it's evolution, baby. You got to evolve. You can't be afraid to evolve both with your products and with your brandings. You want a consistent and memorable identity, but, just like a person, your identity is kind of going to shift. You're going to add things. You're going to be a little different over time. That's kind of natural. That's what happens. And the one question, you have to ask when if you're even considering changing a name or with any rebranding efforts is, does this still represent who we are? Obviously, with Clear Channel, you had a case where they said, does Clear Channel still represent who we are? And it's no. We do mobile, social, and events now. we're totally different, But they just found themselves to be, this Clear Channel and iHeartMedia are two different companies doing different things. So the name change here makes sense, and that's what you want to think about. And with all your branding, like I said, I say every 3 years, at the latest 5 years, you should always be going through your branding and looking at everything. Your name, your logo, your website, the whole shebang. And just saying, does this still represent who we are, what we do, and how people perceive us? So that's kind of the key there. Evolution, baby.
I like that you tied it back into music. That's nice. Because,
I didn't even realize I was doing it. That's how this
brilliant.
works.
Brilliant, my friend. Yeah, I agree with you. Every business is organic. We're all evolving.
And you tend to think of a brand as a thing or something you create, but it's really just who you are. So if who you are changes, it makes sense that your brand should change as well.
That's it for today's show, everyone. You can honestly, wholeheartedly find current and past episodes of this podcast at speakinghuman.com. That's a .com, everybody. You know how hard it was to get that speakinghuman.com name? That's a brand. You can also subscribe to the Speaking Human podcast in the iTunes store.
Which you should definitely do. Who doesn't want to subscribe to this? Email us with your thoughts on today's episode. Tell us what you think of iHeartMedia, or any questions or comments at feedback@thinkmonsters.com. That's feedback@thinkmonsters.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking Human.
Heartbreaker, dream maker, love taker, don't you mess around with me. You're